This episode of the Creep Street Podcast is brought to you by Martini Coffee Roasters. You know, people always look at me weird when I say I start off every morning with a big old martini. But then I set them straight, and I tell them I'm talking about Martini Coffee Roasters coffee. A delicious coffee made by the Martini family. They roast their coffee using a traditional method of sight and sound to roast those little babies to perfection. And they also sell green coffee beans for those home roasters out there. And right now, fans of the Creep Street Podcast can get 20% off their entire order by using the code CREEPSTREET at martinicoffee.com. Once again, for 20% off your order, use the code CREEPSTREET at martinicoffee.com. Martini Coffee Roasters, the perfect coffee to keep you creeps caffeinated.
You've taken a wrong turn down Creep Street.
Citizens of the Milky Way, this is Maureen Bogey.
And this is Dylan Hackworth.
And you are listening to the Creep Street Podcast. Yum, yum, yum.
Wow. It's like a scented candle you can eat.
It sure is.
That's what you know what, Maureen?
Yeah.
This is a little off topic, but, $1 million idea here. A scented candle that is also edible.
Yeah, that sounds good. Maybe Creep Street should get on board with that.
Like if you could make it out of some sort of edible, I don't know, and it tastes like, if it's apple cinnamon, it tastes like apple cinnamon. If it's pumpkin pie, it tastes like pumpkin pie.
Yeah.
I mean, God.
That's one hell of an idea for you.
Because they do, when they're all melty and stuff, there is a part of it that does look appealing. It looks appetizing.
It makes you want to just slurp it up.
Yeah, absolutely. But I digress.
Anywho.
Yeah, that's right. We need a Creep Street candle, baby.
Yes. Let us know if you're interested in that. Who knows if we could make it edible? Probably not, but we could try. Doesn't hurt to try. But thank you all so much for joining us here today. It is a pleasure to have you with us, and we are so grateful to have you all as citizens of the Milky Way.
That is the God's honest truth.
Please like, rate, subscribe, leave a review, tell a friend, tell a family member, anything like that to spread the good word of Creep Street is much appreciated. You can follow us on Instagram at Creep Street Podcast, Twitter at Creep Street Pod. We have a Facebook as well, and on our Facebook we have a subgroup called Citizens of the Milky Way, where anyone can join and post memes, articles, questions, funny photos, anything like that. You can check that out at Citizens of the Milky Way on Facebook. We also have a TikTok, baby. TikTok.
That's right.
And if one episode a week is just not cutting it.
It's not. Oh, man, if it's not cutting the grease.
If you need a little bit more of that good, you can head on over to patreon.com, give it a slash, and then give it a Creep Street Podcast.
Let me tell you something. We got a new top-tier Patreon subscriber that we got to give a shout-out to at the end of the show.
We do, so please stick around for that. It's going to be a blast. Patreon is a place where we post all sorts of bonus content, movie reviews, movie commentaries, short stories.
The list goes on and on.
Full bonus episodes. I mean, there's so much on there. We highly recommend you go ahead and check that out. We have a $2 a month, $5 a month, and $10 a month option.
Ooh, yes.
And you also get access to all previous episodes or previous drops that we've put on Patreon. So you will get a great deal of content.
So even at a $2 a month thing, if you just joined it now at $2 a month, you're going to have a ton of just stuff that was just for that tier that's built up over the, 2 years now that we've had a Patreon.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
So please go ahead and check that out. There is so much fun content on there that I think you all will absolutely enjoy. Once again, that's at patreon.com/Creep Street Podcast. Thank you for supporting the show. Just listening is amazing.
Choice.
We're happy to have you here. And
absolutely.
Last week, or the last 2 episodes, because we had 2 episodes kind of.
That's right. This is a 2-episode week.
Yeah.
Because our most recent, we had a great interview with the incredible Jerry Minor. actor, comedian Jerry Minor.
Yes, if you haven't listened to that, we highly recommend you check it out. We talk about all things Jehovah's Witnesses. He was a survivor of that group, and we are so grateful that he took the time out of his busy schedule to talk to us.
Very busy, folks. A very busy guy.
Yeah, he's been on Eastbound and Down, Unbreakable Kimmy Schmidt, The Office, SNL. Currently is a director at Second City.
Yes.
Really done a lot of great stuff. And then before that, we had our 2 tales of mysterious deaths. We've gotten a lot of great feedback on that. Thank you all to everyone who tuned into that spooky, scary, weird episode.
Absolutely.
But today we have something a little different.
Ooh, boy.
We're kind of taking a little bit of a turn down Creep Street, maybe an alley down Creep Street.
Oh, boy. This is, we're going to some scary places tonight, folks.
That's true. Dylan, tell the citizens what we are talking about today.
Today's episode is The Demon Rain Man.
Whew.
Wow.
Yikes.
Yeah. Just that name alone sends a shiver down your spine.
It sure does.
Now let me continue to tickle your spine with my sources here.
Please.
First, an article from Mysterious Universe, The Demonic Case of the Pennsylvania Rain Man by Brent Swancer, and Unsolved Mysteries, Season 5, Episode 18. God, I love me some Robert Stack.
Oh my God, an icon.
Woo! Well, this is a rather freaky story, and one that I was actually unfamiliar with. As soon as I heard about it, I knew it had to be a Creep Street episode. This will be one of those episodes that kind of straddle the lines between genres. Is this purely paranormal, or is this about the abilities of the human mind that we're just yet unable to understand? Was the subject of our story truly possessed by a demonic entity, or did he have superhuman abilities? Regardless, it is a story that has fascinated people for nearly 40 years. There's also going to be moments where I'm gonna get hot.
Ooh.
Get real hot.
Talk about it.
Put your kettle on me, baby, because I'll bring it to a boil.
Ooh. Okay, I'm interested.
Well, our story begins in a cold February in the small town of Stroudsburg, Pennsylvania. The person at the center of our story is a man named Don Decker, and at this time he was only 21 years old. And when our tale begins, Don was actually sitting at the Monroe County Correctional Facility where he was serving a 4 to 12 month sentence for receiving stolen property. It's kind of vague, so I'm not, and maybe it's as simple as it sounds, but I have no idea as to the context of this crime. But nevertheless, the day in question was February 24th, 1983, and Don had actually been granted a brief leave from the prison to attend his grandfather's funeral.
Oh, wow.
His grandfather was a man named James Kishaw, and he died at the age of 63 from cirrhosis of the liver. Don would shed no tears on this day, however, as he had held a secret from his family since he was a young boy. According to Don, since the age of 7, his grandfather had physically abused him, and some sources even said sexual abuse. So I'm not sure. Many of the sources just said abuse, so I'm not sure what kind of abuse, essentially. It was probably a little of everything. In fact, he was glad he was gone and was only attending the funeral as it was an excuse to get out of jail for a little while. All around him at the funeral were mourners, of course, crying and giving long speeches about what a great guy his grandfather was. And Don did his best to put on a facade that tried to act as though he was grieving. You know?
Right.
But on the inside, his anger was boiling, just seeing people talk so nice about this guy who had hurt him for so long. Adding insult to injury was the fact that his own mother would hardly speak to him. None of my sources really go into why, but the two were apparently not on good terms at all. I'm sure, going to jail didn't help their relationship. I don't know if it was something before then or if this was just like a long-term thing, but essentially not on good terms with Mama.
Oh, no.
In fact, it was so bad, his mother wouldn't even let him stay with her at her house while he was on leave from prison. Instead, he would stay with some friends of the family, a Bob and Jeannie Kiefer. Well, on this night, after returning to the Kiefers after the funeral, that's when things would begin to get crazy. It was dinner time, and Don had gone upstairs to the bathroom of the Kiefer house to wash up. He was washing his hands when all of a sudden Don begins to feel woozy, like he could faint. He collapsed to the floor and he felt as though he was like in a trance almost. To his horror, standing above him was the apparition of his dead grandfather.
Oh, fuck.
The expression on his face was one of pure evil, and this sudden rush of fear actually caused Don to snap out of his trance-like state. As he stood back up, he noticed a searing pain on both his arms. Looking at them, he saw there were deep, gouging scratches running up and down his arms and wrists, and they were so bad that he was bleeding. They were actually bleeding.
Wow.
Still in shock, Don managed to stagger downstairs, and he tells Bob and Jeannie about what he had just experienced upstairs. And while he's telling them about this trance-like state and seeing the specter of his dead grandfather, that's when all three of them heard a loud banging sound come from somewhere above them upstairs. Just as they had heard this unexplainable banging sound, they watched as water began to trickle down the walls and the ceiling. Bob and Jeannie are just standing there, shocked, and they watch as water begins to even now come up from the floor of the house, and it keeps coming more and more, stronger and stronger. But it didn't stop there. They look over at Don to see he has once again slipped into a trance-like state, like he claimed to have been upstairs. Bob and Jeannie, they're panicking, and, of course, they're not sure what to do, so they call their landlord, and his name is Ron Van Wy, spelled W-H-Y, like the question.
Oh, wow.
Ron, he arrives at the house, and the dripping is only, the water is only getting worse and worse. Like I said, it's bubbling up from the floor, it's coming down from the ceiling. Absolute mess. Not to mention horrifying. And Van Wy was equally as stumped as the Kiefers because he knew, as the landlord, where the pipes were actually located in the house, and they were on the complete other end of the house from where this water was coming from. Later, he would be quoted saying, "We decided maybe it was the plumbing, but there were no pipes in the front end of the house to leak. There was basically nothing there that the water could have come from. After watching it for a while, I discovered that it wasn't only coming from the ceiling down, it could come from the wall, or from the floor up. There was no basic direction that it was coming from. It could come from anywhere."
What?
Right.
What the fuck?
Coming at him from all angles here. Well, seeing as Ron was just as stumped as Bob and Jeannie, the only thing they could think to do next was to call the police. Before long, two officers arrived at the house, officers Richard Walbert and a John Valjean.
Like Jean Valjean?
It's the last name is spelled B-A-U-J-A-N.
Oh.
I'm guessing it's Beaujean, like it's French. I don't think it's Beaujean.
No.
I mean, it could be, but I mean, I'm assuming that's what it is, so my apologies if I am mispronouncing it. But anyway, Richard Walbert and Jean Valjean. According to my source, he dreamed a dream of time gone by. Okay. According to my source, the moment the two officers stepped into the house, they were drenched by the mysterious falling water. It was now coming down heavier than ever. And by now, the water was behaving in ways that water just don't do.
Oh, God.
Not only was it coming down from the ceiling and the walls, the officers' jaws dropped as they watched water seemingly defy gravity, moving horizontally from one room to the next, even falling up from the floor to the ceiling.
What the hell?
Some water would actually just float in the middle of the air. Officer Valjean would later say this: "I literally had a chill going up my spine. Made the hairs stand up on your neck. That's how I felt. This was a situation where things were happening that I never ever dreamed could possibly happen, and there was no way of explaining what was going on." So freaky, we're getting the waterworks.
Yeah.
It's this guy is a walking slip and slide.
Oh, yeah. Big time.
Aside from the freaky waterworks, the officers could tell Don was not in a good state. He was still deep in this trance, and his complexion was pale and sickly. They told Bob and Jeannie to get Don out of the house and to take him to the pizzeria across the street until they could relay the story to, their superiors and figure out what to do next. So Ron, the landlord, he stayed in the house and continued trying to figure out what the hell was going on, and the pizzeria across the street was actually owned by a woman named Pam Scrofano, and she had actually stopped by the house earlier. I'm assuming she must have known the Kiefers personally. And she saw these strange waterworks for herself, so she was already privy to what was going on. That's probably why they felt comfortable taking him there, because they know the owner,
Right.
So Bob and Jeannie grab hold of Don, and they get him out of the house, and the moment Don steps out of the house, Bob and Jeannie turned around to see that the water stopped on a dime.
What the fuck?
Literally, the moment Dawn was out the door, it stopped. Wacky, right?
Yeah.
It's gonna get wilder, folks. Buckle up.
Oh, no.
Must be this tall to ride.
Oh, come on.
Bobby and Jeannie were able to get Don in the pizzeria, and they got him seated. By now, Don appeared to practically be in a vegetative state, and Pam, the owner of the pizzeria, comes and sits with them, and Don and Bob and Jeannie tell her about all the shit that's been going on and what they've seen, and Pam can see that Don is just out of it. And she just immediately is like, hey, this guy's probably possessed. A few minutes later, wouldn't you know it, water began to trickle down from the ceiling and down the walls of the pizzeria, just as it had in the Kiefer's house. Well, Pam freaks the fuck out.
Yeah, I mean, I would too. I mean, the water damage, for Christ's sakes.
Oh, yeah. We'll talk about that later, because that's what I want to know. Pam's freaking out, thinking this is clearly something demonic and that it was emanating from Don. Running into the back of the pizzeria, Pam reemerged carrying with her a crucifix. Thinking on her feet, Pam just pressed this crucifix against Don's skin. And immediately, bang, he snaps out of the trance, jumping backwards as if in pain, as if it hurt.
Ooh.
There where she had touched him was a burn in the shape of a crucifix.
Oh, no. Oh, no. We've heard this before.
Pam was later quoted saying, "You looked at Danny and he was like in a trance. He would look at you but not knowing you were there. I said to Jeannie, he's got to be possessed. We're sitting there. A couple of seconds later, there's water all over the pizzeria, too. I've never seen anything like that happen. I went into the cash register. I had a crucifix there. I took it out, put it on him. And the minute I put it on him and it touched his skin, he got burned. There's no way that anybody could have played a joke like that. This was real. Donnie was doing it himself. He was doing it without realizing he was doing it." So freaky. Pam's getting a first-class show to this. She's getting front row seats.
Oh, yeah.
To the Donnie show.
Oh, yeah.
To the waterworks, baby. Mm-hmm. The water in the pizzeria continued to fall, gradually intensifying. Not knowing what to do, the Kiefers grabbed Don and dragged him out of the pizzeria. And wouldn't you know it, the water immediately stopped in the pizzeria.
Well, there you go.
And by this time, Don is now like fully lucid. He's awake because I'm assuming the shock from the crucifix kind of woke his ass up.
Right.
So lacking options, they carried Don, as you'd expect, back to their house. And of course, the moment they enter the home, the water starts again.
Oh, God.
Side note, stand him in the yard.
Right.
It would water the lawn. Imagine, I mean, here's the question. You brought it up earlier. Now, we're assuming this water is conjured supernaturally. Mm-hmm. Does it have the same effects like regular water would do to your property if it flooded like that?
Right, it would, like, all over the walls.
Imagine being the landlord, imagine being the person that lives there. Imagine, and I'm assuming there's probably all sorts of health code violations for that goddamn pizzeria.
Yeah, I mean, imagine the mold.
Oh.
So gross.
And that's just on the pizza.
Right.
So they're back in their own living room, and they just have no idea what to do next. They called the police, and the police saw the weirdness for themselves, and now the police are going back to report to their superiors because even they don't know what to do. What do you do next? Who do you call?
Ghostbusters?
Well, things would only keep getting stranger, my friends. They're all standing in the living room, wondering what in the hell to do next, when suddenly noises from the kitchen caught their attention. Despite no one even being in the kitchen, they could hear the sound of all the pots and pans in their cupboards and drawers and countertops rattling around. They were rattling enough that some of these pots and pans even fell off countertops and onto the floor. Ron, the landlord, he's still there in attendance, and by now, even his wife is there. Her name, believe it or not, is Romaine, spelled Romayne.
Oh, very cool.
Very cool. For some reason, despite all this weirdness, she's still skeptical and thought perhaps that the Kiefers were doing this themselves somehow. Ron and Romaine actually confronted the Kiefers with their suspicions, which of course led to a heated exchange.
Oh, yikes. I mean, it's like, how could you fake this?
You're right. But right in the middle of their arguing, all of them witnessed as Don was lifted off the ground by some unseen force and violently thrown against the wall.
Oh my God.
Don himself was later quoted saying, "The pots and pans over the stove started rattling. That's when I got levitated off the floor. I was just like floating. Then it was like a push. It wasn't like somebody taking their hand and pushing me. It was like feeling it all over your body at once. I'm a big guy, you know. I've always been assertive, and that made me feel like a newborn. You know, I'm scared right now just talking about it, really. Boy, oh boy. So it's not like hands, like the feeling of spectral hands pushing you. It's like a force, an actual just force.
Right.
A wall of power, a wall of energy.
Huh.
Well, not long after this, the two police officers, Baljean and Walbert, returned to the house, this time with their police chief, Gary Roberts. And Roberts, he's a very skeptical SOB.
Oh, yeah.
He's not pleased about getting dragged over to a house with some supernatural bullshit apparently going on.
Oh, God.
They arrive, and of course the water's coming down as hard as ever. Waters still seem to be defying gravity, floating every which way. Roberts conducted a brief inspection, getting drenched in the process. And to everyone's shock, Gary Roberts turned to the officers and chewed them out for dragging him over there for a simple pipe leak.
I mean, come on.
He told them, now this is where it gets weird, he told them not to even file a report over it, and to just go on as if nothing had happened at all. In fact, the chief apparently even told them they better not even investigate the matter further and to never return to the Kiefer house again.
What the fuck?
Yeah.
Why?
I don't know. Officer Baljean and Walbert, they were not going to obey that order.
Oh, good.
They felt personally like the chief had witnessed something that truly frightened him, and this was sort of his way of coping with it, by lashing out at them.
Right.
He truly did see something his mind couldn't explain, and that was his go-to survival mechanism.
Right.
As he lashed out. The two officers would return to the house the very next day, bringing with them two other officers, a Bill Davies and a Lieutenant John Rundle. To their surprise, everything on this day actually seemed fairly normal. The water had stopped flowing, and while everyone was still freaked out, they were hoping that whatever the events of the day previous were about, that it was behind them. Well, Officer Davies, he's very interested, but personally a bit skeptical of this story. He had heard about how the crucifix had supposedly burned Don the prior day, so he handed Don a gold cross to see his reaction. And Don didn't necessarily jump back, but he did say it felt very hot and that he could barely hold it. On the inside, Davies is thinking to himself that Don may just be putting on an act for them. But those doubts were quickly quashed when once again, everyone present watched in terror as Don was once again lifted off the floor by an unseen force, and then thrown across the room like he was a toy. When they rushed over to Don to see if he was okay, they could see fresh new scratches on him that were not there just moments ago. They appeared to be claw marks.
What the fuck?
Lieutenant John Rundle would later be quoted saying, "All of a sudden he lifted up off the ground and he flew across the room with the force as though a bus had hit him. There were 3 claw marks on the side of his neck which drew blood. I have no answer for it whatsoever, and I just draw a blank, even today." Wow. Ron the landlord was also in attendance that day, and, well, damn it, enough was enough. He got on the horn and started calling every church in the nearby area, pleading with them to send someone out to perform an exorcism or a cleansing. Of course, the Catholic Church doesn't just go around performing these rituals willy-nilly.
Right.
So he was turned down by practically everyone that he called. It would actually be an evangelical preacher that would agree to come visit the family.
Interesting.
This gentleman sat and chatted with Don and prayed for him. According to my source, there was a brief moment where Don apparently curled his hands into fists and became very tense, but then his body just relaxed into what the source describes as an almost meditative state.
Wow.
Following the prayer, Don said he felt much better, as if something had released its grip on him. And surprisingly, the water would no longer fall at the Kiefer's house. Short time later, Don's prison release came to an end and he returned to the jail. And that's where our story ends. Not.
Oh, God.
Oh, you think it was going to be that short? Sorry, folks. There's a little more water in this whistle.
Oh, gosh.
There's a little more water on this slip and slide, folks. His first few days back at the jail were relatively quiet. Don was deep in thought, thinking about all that had happened in the days prior, and he began to wonder to himself if these strange events weren't something so much happening to him, but that he himself could actually control this strange water. Almost like a superpower. Well, not expecting much, Don tried to concentrate and see if he could make something strange happen. All of a sudden, water began to trickle down the walls of his holding cell and pool up from the floor. A prison guard noticed this and scolded Don, thinking he was fucking around with the toilet or something.
Oh, yeah.
But Don told the guard he had conjured this water himself. So the guard laughs it off and says, "Oh yeah? Well, why don't you try making it rain in the warden's office?" A man named Lieutenant David Keenhold, he's the warden of this prison. And Don just said, "Sure." Well, the guard just laughs this off and he walks over to the warden's office to tell him about this wacky prisoner. Well, that smile was about to be wiped off his fucking face. When he walked into the warden's office, he found the warden standing up, confused as to why his shirt suddenly was soaking wet. Warden Keenhold was later quoted saying,
"I was sitting at the desk writing a report. I was all by myself in the administrative area. Nobody else was around. It was approximately 8 in the evening. At the time, I didn't feel anything, but my shirt was drooping down, and right about the center of my sternum, about 4 inches long, 2 inches wide, I was just saturated with water. I was startled. I was scared. The officer was frightened at that particular time, and I just didn't have an explanation why it happened."
So he can get you wet, folks.
Oh, come on. Let's not be coarse. Let's not be crass.
Oh boy, here we go. So the warden, he does a little investigating and he finds out about all the strange shit that had been happening to Don while he was on leave. Immediately, this warden Keenhold, he's convinced that Don is under some sort of demonic influence.
Yeah.
So he makes a call to the prison minister and insists that he visit immediately to assess what might be going on with Don. Well, the Reverend William Blackburn is very skeptical about this whole story, and he assumes that Don is somehow able to, pull one over on them. But nevertheless, he comes down and visits with Don to see if he can get to the bottom of it. Don told him about all the strange water phenomenon as well as the crosses burning him when they touched him. At first, the Reverend straight up told him that it was all in his head. But as the two kept talking, strange things began to happen around them that the Reverend was unable to ignore. Don fell into one of his classic trances, his eyes closed and his fingers rubbing together. Almost immediately, the cell was filled by an awful smell that seemed to be coming from nowhere. Moments later, the rain came again. Immediately, the Reverend grabs his Bible and begins performing an impromptu exorcism. Some time passed and the Reverend fervently prayed as everyone in the cell was now getting soaked by this rain. Strangely though, according to my source, the Bible itself remained absolutely dry during the whole thing.
Wow.
The Reverend didn't let up in his prayer, and after some time, the atmosphere lightened, and Don returned to normal. Once again, he felt a sense of immense relief, and Don and the Reverend actually embraced in their relief, a big old hug.
Oh, cute.
There was an incredible sense of peace that just swept over everyone present. The Reverend Blackburn was later quoted saying,
"All of a sudden, his demeanor changed and this smell came into the room. Nurses and doctors, medical people say when you walk into a room where someone is dying with a cancer or something, usually there's a smell. You can tell when you walk in the room. I smelled a smell like that multiplied 5 times at least. Evil. Foreboding." He raised his hand and rubbed his fingers together, and all of a sudden, it started to rain. It was like the devil's rain. It was a mist. I was in the presence of evil. I opened up the Bible and started to read to him, but the pages never got wet. So help me, it was a frightening thing. I think I was praying more for me than him. I prayed, and it was only a brief period and the rain stopped. He subsided, and you could feel a peace. He said thank you. He got tears in his eyes. We hugged and prayed together. He was possessed. There was no doubt in my mind. There's no way a human could do what he did in that room. There's no way that he did anything. But what he did was spiritual, and it wasn't of God. Guaranteed, it was not of God.
Wow.
Freaky. Freaky, folks. That's why you come here. That's why you come to the old Creep Street, baby.
That's right. That's right. This is what it's all about.
Now, this would actually be the last time that weird shit would happen like this to Don. This case has continued to fascinate paranormal enthusiasts in the decades since, partly because of the number of witnesses that also include police officers, a prison guard, even a prison warden. 2 paranormal investigators, in particular, took interest in this case, a Chip Decker, not related to Don Decker in any way, and a Peter Jordan. Peter was quoted saying,
"I think what makes this case very unique is that all of the witnesses are so credible. We're dealing with very good, well-seasoned police officers that were obviously rather frightened and shaken by this, but also had the powers of observation. The Donald Decker case is by far the singularly most fascinating and important case I have ever personally been involved in. That does not mean I believe that it necessarily is proof positive to me of demonic infestation, but it is the case in my own personal experience up to this point that comes the closest to that hypothesis.
Now, theories obviously abound as to what really happened to Don. Of course, there is the main theory that he was under some sort of demonic influence. Don has actually stated, though, that he personally thinks it was the spirit of his deceased grandfather harassing him from beyond the grave.
Wow.
Many also wonder if this wasn't some sort of psychokinetic ability that Don had. Perhaps due to pent-up frustration, it manifested in this weird way, almost like poltergeist activity.
Right, I could see that.
Many note how it all began following the death of his grandfather. Perhaps those years of bottled-up emotions concerning the years of abuse he suffered, it suddenly released and manifested itself in this way. Water like this has been reported in other poltergeist cases, especially one concerning Jackie Hernandez of the San Pedro haunting, which we will save for a future episode.
That's right.
But of course, there are folks who still cannot believe that it was real. One very vocal skeptic is a New Zealand researcher named Robert Bartholomew. The trances, he says, could have been induced by stress and psychological trauma, if not outright fate. He also finds it very suspicious that all of the witnesses jumped immediately to exorcism without ever seeking medical attention. As for the water, Bartholomew references a report by the Manufactured Housing Research Alliance that states homes in Pennsylvania are apparently at a particular risk for ice damming. That is when warm air melts ice and snow in the attic and on top of the house that leaks in. As for all of the witnesses, though, Bartholomew has this to say.
Human perception is notoriously unreliable even under ideal conditions. Stress can alter perceptions, and it is difficult to imagine few events more stressful than believing you are in the presence of a man who is possessed by demonic forces.
Furthermore, he asked why throughout all the excitement, no one thought to grab a camera
Oh, yeah, that's
and take
true.
any photos. He thinks it was just a perfect storm of weather phenomenon and just human superstition, saying,
I want to believe in the paranormal. I would describe myself as an open-minded researcher who follows where the facts lead, and in this instance, it's an indictment of TV docudramas. I do not think those involved are lying. I think it is a classic case of social delusion. If these events happen the way people claim they did over several days, it is beyond belief that no one took photos.
That's a pretty good point.
That is a very good point. That is interesting.
It is the 80s, so I mean, it's not like cameras weren't... I mean, obviously, you didn't have just an iPhone to rip out and take a photo, but...
Right. But,
you know.
Their cameras are readily available. But it is, I don't know. I just don't know.
Also, on a weird closing note, many years later in 2012, Don was arrested for arson.
Whoa.
When he apparently tried to burn down a restaurant in the Poconos.
Oh.
Hope Michael Scott wasn't there.
Yeah.
Who knows what that's all about? It's so funny because that shouldn't overshadow the story. He can be a piece of shit who tries to burn things down and have still experienced this.
Right.
But it's just kind of, who understands? Humans are just fucking wild.
So wild.
And who knows what obviously there's no good reason to burn down a restaurant, but it does kind of puts a pale over the story because it's like, well, clearly this guy is kind of fucked up, but who knows? Maureen, thoughts?
I mean, it's a very interesting story. And the fact that there are so many witnesses, and some of them are even police officers, kind of reminds me of the Enfield poltergeist.
Yeah, absolutely.
But it is interesting, about how there aren't any photos of this or video of this when you think that would absolutely be the case.
Right.
But I mean, it's a scary, weird story. I do kind of am curious about this idea that it's kind of like this psychokinetic ability that he had, or kind of like poltergeist activity.
That's what I'm leaning toward.
Yeah.
Perhaps just, obviously, who knows? These are all theories. And perhaps that this exorcism, in a way, therapeutically, because he believed in it, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
Therapeutically, it, helped him.
Right.
But it makes you wonder, if we do have these abilities, is there ways to access them without, abuse and trauma and things like that?
Right.
You know what I mean? That's the question is,
right.
If we all, or if some people even have these abilities, is it possible to access them without having to be put through fucking hell?
Right. Absolutely. I don't know. But it is a very interesting story. And Dylan, thank you so much for doing that fantastic, fantastic research.
Of course. Well, hey, I got a list of names of people I wouldn't mind getting wet and wild with.
Oh, wow. Wow.
we've got a newcomer, folks.
We sure do. Stick around till the end and we'll tell you.
Let's hear it. The top tier Patreon subscribers. Of course, the Dream, James Watkins, the Finnish face via Lungfist, the Madman Marcus Hall, the Vivacious Vicky McHugh, the Tenacious Teresa Hackworth, the Heartbreak Kid Chris Hackworth, the oh-so-suave Sean Richardson, the British Bone Breaker Bex Martin, the Notorious Nicholas Barker, the Terrifying Taylor Lashmet, the Count of Cool Cameron Corliss, the Archduke of Attitude Adam Archer, the Sinister Sam Kiker, the Nightmare of New Zealand Noeline Vivilli, the Loathsome Johnny Love, the Carnivorous Kevin Bogey, the Killer Stud Carl Staub, the Firestarter Heather Carter, the Conqueror Christopher Damian Damaris, the Awfully Awesome Annie, the Murderous Maggie Leach, the Sort of Sexy Sam Hackworth, the Evil Elizabeth Riley, Lauren Hellfire Hernandez Lopez, the Maniacal Laura Maynard, the Vicious Karen Van Buren, the Arch Nemesis Aaron Bird, the Sadistic Sergio Castillo, the Rapscallion Ryan Crum, the Beast Benjamin Huang, the Devilish Chris Doucette, the Psycho Sam, and the newcomer, the Electric Emily Jean.
Wow. Emily, thank you so much for joining us. We are over the moon to have you, and you are so welcome here with the Patreon community. It is an honor and a privilege to have you as a member of the Creep Street Homeowners Association.
Yes, welcome, Emily. Enjoy those goodies. Welcome to the family. And I want to give another shout out. The Madman Marcus Hall has a birthday, I think, in a few days. I think after this podcast comes out, it'll come out in between this episode and the next. So a big old happy birthday to one of my best pals, the Madman Marcus Hall.
Beautiful stuff. Beautiful stuff.
And I'll tell you, I'm excited. I'm going to, I've got to go do a show down in Charlotte, North Carolina this weekend with the Loathsome Johnny Love. He's going to be on piano.
Oh, incredible.
Can't wait for that. We're going to have a great time down in Charlotte, down in the Queen City.
Oh, going to be beautiful.
That's right. That's right. Well, folks, of course, like, rate, subscribe, tell your friends, family, loved ones, evangelize the name of Creep Street. Give us 5 stars on whatever outlet you listen on. God, we cannot tell you how much we love the Creep Street community. Citizens of the Milky Way, my name is Dylan Hackworth.
I'm Maureen Bogey.
Good night and goodbye.
Goodbye.